I was 20 years old, eager to make my mark on the world, and that began with finding a new home after deciding to move out of my parents' house. When I discovered the new apartment, I realized it was a fantastic deal. It had 2 bedrooms, a reasonably sized kitchen, and was only 10 minutes from my job. The landlord was quite easygoing, but the only drawback was that he required me to have a roommate to share the rent. So I quickly went online and posted an ad for a live-in roommate on Craigslist, hoping for a response. A few days later, someone named Mark replied, which is the name I will use for this story. We chatted online for a bit, and Mark asked me several questions about the apartment. We then agreed to meet in person before I could accept him as my roommate. We met at a coffee shop, and when I saw Mark, he appeared quite ordinary and was very quiet. He looked muscular and wore glasses, but what struck me as unusual was the way he spoke, which was in short, clipped sentences. When I inquired about his job, Mark told me he was a data analyst and mentioned that he would mostly be home. I thought that would be fine since I would be at my office job or spending time with friends elsewhere. He didn't seem like the type to throw wild parties, which I appreciated. So we signed the lease together and moved into the apartment as roommates. All right, let's dive into the more intriguing part of my story. So, the first month living with Mark was pretty chill, even though it felt a little strange. I noticed that Mark spent a ton of time in his room. Every time I woke up from a nap, he'd be holed up in there, and when I got back from work, he was still MIA. I could hear his keyboard softly clacking whenever I walked past his door. Whenever I spotted him in the hallway, I'd try to say hi, but he'd either just give a nod or completely brush me off before retreating to his room. But hey, he paid his rent on time, kept his area tidy, and was generally quiet. So I thought he must be a decent roommate, right? But then things started to shift. Whenever I bought a pack of my favorite soda and put it in the fridge, I'd notice a couple of bottles missing by the next day. When I asked Mark about it, he always gave me the same line. I don't know what happened to them. I don't drink. For some reason, I just shrugged it off, thinking maybe I'd forgotten I drank them or gave them to a friend. But then my food started disappearing too. It wasn't a ton at once, just a slice of deli meat here and a few grapes there. One morning I opened a new box of cereal and found it already opened with half the contents gone. I knew I had to confront him again. So I found Mark messing around in his room and decided to be more direct this time. Seriously, Mark, have you been having friends over? My food keeps vanishing. He looked at me like I was nuts and said flatly, no one else has been here. My bedroom door didn't have a lock, and I never thought I needed one until after that conversation. Suddenly, I started feeling exposed, and I began to notice little things out of place, like a book I'd left on my nightstand, and would be slightly moved, or my phone charger, which I always kept wrapped up, would somehow be undone when I went to use it. Then one morning, I could have sworn my toothbrush felt a bit wet, like someone else had used it before me. But soon, the real fear kicked in, and that's when I began to see the real Mark. I'd just be sitting in the living room reading or watching TV, and I'd look over to see him standing silently in the hallway just watching. He wouldn't say a word or make a sound, and before I could even say anything, he'd turn around and I'd hear the door to his room close behind him. It felt uncomfortable, like Mark was possessed by something eerie. Then one night, I woke up to use the bathroom at 3:00 a.m., and as I walked past the living room, I saw him. Mark was sitting on the couch just staring at the TV, which was showing nothing but static. He sat there completely still, only blinking like some kind of weird bug. Mark. He jumped as if I'd startled him out of a trance, and then he whipped his head towards me, his glasses reflecting the TV light. At first, his expression was unreadable, almost awkward, but then he finally spoke up. Sorry, I couldn't sleep. He stood up and went back to his room, and I did my business and headed back to mine. But after that, my paranoia ramped up. I actually bought a door stopper for my bedroom door and started locking it every time I came home, making sure to return at unpredictable hours. I realized that what was supposed to be my home was starting to feel more like a cage with a wild animal lurking inside. Then came the worst part. I had been out with friends enjoying some soda and returned to the apartment around midnight. I was feeling buzzed and a bit dizzy, and when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I noticed the place was dark and quiet. But for some reason, I didn't care. I just kicked off my shoes and headed straight for my room. As I approached my door, I noticed a glow coming from underneath it, and I could hear a faint scratching sound. My stomach dropped, and I stood there listening to the rhythmic, delicate scratching. My heart was racing, and I realized Mark had to be in my room. He was invading my space. Every instinct told me to call the cops or kick the door down, but I felt slow and hesitant. I instinctively pulled out my car keys, ready to use them as a weapon just in case I was wrong. Taking a deep breath, I reminded myself that this was my apartment, and Mark was just a temporary roommate I found online. He wasn't going to violate my space anymore. So, without saying a word, I turned the doorknob and shoved the door open, flipping on the light. My face went pale. There was Mark sitting cross-legged on my bed with my laptop open. I cleared my throat, and he looked up startled. His eyes widened behind his glasses. He chuckled, saying, "You're back kind of early." The sight of him casually sitting on my bed, fiddling with my personal stuff in the dead of night, was more terrifying than any monster. It felt like a total invasion. I pointed at my laptop and asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm just cleaning it," he replied. But I noticed he didn't have any cleaning supplies, just a hammer and a screwdriver beside him. I stared at him, unable to find the words, feeling anger bubbling up inside me. His complete disregard for boundaries was infuriating, and I could feel sweat forming on my forehead. Without any hesitation, I snapped at him to get out of my room right now and take his creepy tools with him. Mark didn't say a word as he closed my laptop, placed it on my bed, then grabbed the hammer and screwdriver, walking past me without another word. I heard the door to his room click softly shut behind him. Here I was, standing in my room, trembling with fear and my hands shaking uncontrollably. Did Mark really think I'd buy his excuse about cleaning my laptop with a hammer and screwdriver? That night I couldn't sleep. I packed a small bag, locked my door from the inside, and shoved a door wedge in place, staying up as long as I could, listening intently. The next morning, I left the apartment and called my friend David, telling him I needed a place to crash for a few days. I made up a story about a plumbing leak in the bathroom. When I returned to the apartment a week later, while Mark was at his so-called remote office meeting, which I never believed anyway, I packed up all my stuff, hired a moving company, and got out of there. Sure, I had to pay a penalty to break the lease, which hurt my wallet, but the relief was immediate and overwhelming. I never spoke to Mark again. I never got any explanation. I don't know what was going on with him, whether he was lonely, mentally unwell, or just plain weird. All I know is that the feeling of being watched, of my space being violated, and of not feeling safe in my own home was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. I lived in a 2 BHK flat on the 6th floor of an apartment complex. It was a decent place, and I shared it with 2 friends. Let's call them Alex and Robin. I shared a bedroom with Robin, and Alex had the other room all to herself. It was around the time of Holi, so the entire building was practically empty. Most families and bachelors who lived on our floor had gone back to their respective hometowns to celebrate. It was eerily quiet. Alex had told us she was going to her hometown as well, and wasn't supposed to be back until the next day. So, as far as I knew, it was just going to be Robin and me in the flat. I was working the night shift that day. I clocked out late and didn't get back to the apartment complex until 2:00 a.m. I was exhausted and just wanted to crash. I took the elevator up to the 6th floor. The hallway was silent. Since we had an automatic lock installed on the main door, I didn't need to ring the bell. I just punched in the code, heard the familiar beep, and unlocked the door. The moment I stepped inside, I froze. The complete flat was in total darkness. Not a single tube light was on. Usually, we kept a small nightlight on in the living room or the hallway, but it was pitch black. It felt heavy, like the air was too thick. I pulled out my mobile phone and turned on the torch. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty living room. Shadows danced on the walls, making the furniture look like crouching figures. I walked carefully toward my room. "Robin," I called out softly, no answer. I reached our bedroom door and knocked. "Robin, open up, it's me." I had to call her name 3 or 4 times before I heard the lock click. The door opened a crack, and then Robin grabbed my arm and yanked me inside, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it instantly. "What is going on?" I asked, annoyed. "Why are there no lights on?" I shone my torch on Robin's face. She looked pale, like she had seen a ghost. She was trembling. "I don't know why there is no electricity, but that's not the problem. Someone is in the other room." I was shocked. "What? Alex is gone." "I know," Robin said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I heard noises. About an hour ago, I heard the front door open and close, but nobody came to our room. Then I heard heavy footsteps walking around the living room, and then someone knocked on our door twice." I didn't answer. I was too scared. We were new to this area, and recently there had been news about robberies in the neighborhood. 2 girls alone in an empty building on the 6th floor. We were easy targets. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes," she hissed. "Listen." We stood in silence. The flat was dead quiet, but then I heard it. A faint creak from the floorboards in the hallway. I didn't know what to do. If there was a robber, were they waiting for us to come out? But we couldn't stay in the dark forever. We need to check the electricity. "If we have lights, we have an advantage," I said. Somehow, we gathered the courage. I held my phone like a weapon. We slowly unlocked our bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. It was terrifying. Every shadow looked like a man standing there. We crept to the distribution board near the entrance. I shone the light on the MCB circuit breakers. They were down, all of them. "Someone turned them off," Robin whispered, clutching my shirt. "Or they tripped," I said, trying to be rational, though I didn't believe it. I reached up and flipped them back on. The tube lights flickered and buzzed to life. The sudden brightness was blinding for a second. The living room was empty. Nothing was stolen. The TV was there. The laptops were on the table. "Check Alex's room," I said. We walked toward the second bedroom. The door was shut. I reached out and tried the handle. "It was locked. See," Robin said, backing away. "Alex is not here. She has her keys with her. Someone broke in and locked themselves inside." That was the scariest moment, knowing someone was just a few feet away behind a thin wooden door. We didn't hear any sound from inside, just silence. We ran back to our room and locked it again. We were hell scared by that time. We debated calling the police, but what if it was nothing but the locked door, the tripped breakers, and the knocking? It didn't add up. We decided to wait until morning. Neither of us slept. We sat on the bed, staring at the door, jumping at every little sound. Finally, at 5:00 a.m., the sun started to come up. The morning light gave us a little bit of confidence. We decided we couldn't live like this. We had to confront whoever was in that room. We came up with a plan. We went to the main door and left it wide open. This was our escape route, or a way for us to run if the person attacked us. Then we armed ourselves. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a packet of red chili powder and a broomstick. Robin grabbed a sharp kitchen knife. It looked ridiculous, but we were desperate. "Ready?" I asked. Robin nodded, shaking the knife. We walked up to Alex's door. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Taking the name of the Lord, I banged on the door with the broomstick. "Who is inside? Open the door," I shouted, trying to sound tough. We heard movement immediately, the sound of bed springs creaking. Someone was getting up. Then heavy footsteps approached the door. Robin raised the knife. I tore the corner of the chili powder packet, ready to throw it in the attacker's eyes. The lock clicked, the handle turned. We braced ourselves to hit. The door swung open. Standing there, wearing pajamas with messy hair and eyes half closed from sleep, was Alex. She looked at the broom, then at the knife, then at the chili powder. She gave us a death stare. "What do you guys want so early in the morning?" she groaned, rubbing her eyes. "Are you crazy?" We stood there frozen, the knife lowered slowly, the broomstick dropped to my side. We were completely shocked and speechless. "Alex," I stammered, "are you back?" "Yeah," she yawned. "I came back a day early. My phone died on the way, so I couldn't text you. I got in around 1:00 a.m. I was super tired, so I just crashed. But the lights?" Robin asked. "Oh yeah, the iron was acting weird when I plugged it in to smooth out my shirt for work tomorrow. It sparked, and everything went dark. I didn't know how to fix the MCB, so I just went to sleep. I figured I'd ask you guys in the morning." "And the knocking?" Robin asked. "I knocked on your door to tell you the power was out, but you guys didn't answer, so I assumed you were asleep." We just stared at her. Not even a single time during the whole night did it occur to us that it could be Alex. "Nothing," I finally answered. "Go back to sleep." We went back to our room, closed the door, and looked at each other. The tension broke, and we started laughing. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. We had spent 5 hours terrified of a ghost or a robber armed with chili powder, only to almost attack our roommate who was just trying to sleep. It was scary in the moment, but we had a hearty laugh about it over breakfast. But I still remember the feeling of that dark hallway. I don't think I'll ever be that scared again. I've been married since I was 23 years old. I'm 64 now. My husband and I have been through everything together. Financial struggles, raising kids, illness, but we always came out stronger. That was until about 15 years ago. That was the year our marriage almost ended and my life almost ended. All because I tried to be a nice person. At the time, I was working at Washington Mutual, or WAYU, before the big changes happened. I was 49 then. We had a temp employee start working with us named Julie. It was funny at first, because that's my name too. So we instantly had that little connection. Julie was around my age, maybe a few years younger, but life had been much harder on her. She looked tired, not just sleepy, but worn down to the bone. I found out pretty quickly that she was living out of her car in the parking lot. She didn't get along with her adult daughter, and she had absolutely no support system. I'm a mother, and at the time I was raising my 8-year-old granddaughter, so my maternal instincts were in overdrive. I felt sorry for her. After a few months of working together, we became what I thought were good friends. She seemed normal, just down on her luck. Since my husband and I owned a large 5-bedroom house, it felt ridiculous that she was sleeping in her car while I had empty rooms gathering dust. I asked her if she wanted to rent one of the spare bedrooms. I even told her, "Look, don't worry about rent for the first month. Just get on your feet, save some money, and we can figure it out later." I wanted to be careful because of my granddaughter living with us, but Julie seemed gentle. I didn't see a threat. I saw a woman who needed a break. That was the biggest mistake of my life. The change wasn't gradual. It was like a switch flipped the moment she moved her bags in. Within a week, the grateful, quiet woman I knew at the bank disappeared. It started with the nights. Our house is large and sounds carry. I would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning to the sound of the front door opening and closing. She was sneaking out at all hours. Sometimes she'd be gone for 20 minutes. Sometimes she'd be gone until just before sunrise. When she came back in, she didn't care about being quiet. She would stomp up the stairs, slamming doors. When I confronted her, she would get these wide, glassy eyes and say she was just going for a walk. I later found out it was drugs, hard drugs. The smell started seeping out from under her door. A chemical burnt plastic smell that made me nauseous. Then she turned on my granddaughter. One Saturday, my granddaughter knocked on Julie's door to ask if she wanted a cookie we had just baked. I heard Julie scream, a guttural demonic scream, "Get away from me, you little brat." I ran upstairs. Julie was standing in the doorway, her hair wild, shaking. My granddaughter was crying. When Julie saw me, her face instantly changed to a fake smile. "She just startled me, that's all she said, but the look in her eyes was cold. It was predatory. The scariest part, though, was what she did to my husband and me. She was smart. She knew she couldn't fight us both, so she tried to separate us. She would wait until I was at work and tell my husband lies, that I was talking about him behind his back, or that I was planning to kick him out. Then she'd come to me and whisper that my husband was making passes at her. It caused huge fights, screaming matches that we had never had in decades of marriage. The atmosphere in the house became heavy and toxic. My husband, a patient man, was at his breaking point. He was packing a bag one night, telling me, "I can't live with that woman in this house, and if you won't kick her out, I'm leaving." I was out of my mind with worry. I realized I had led a monster into our sanctuary. The breaking point for me wasn't the arguments, though. It was what happened one night when I woke up thirsty. I walked into the hallway and saw Julie standing at the end of the hall in the dark. She wasn't moving. She was just staring at the door to my granddaughter's room. She stood there for a full minute, just breathing heavily before she realized I was there and darted back into her room. I went to work the next day shaking. I talked to my boss about everything. We got the area manager on a conference call. I was terrified she had squatters' rights or something. The manager told me, "You need to get her out immediately. If she establishes legal residency, you'll have to go through a court eviction." She had been there long enough that she technically had residency, but I couldn't wait for a court order. I was scared for my granddaughter's life. I went home early. I called my daughter and her husband to come over. I needed witnesses. I wasn't going to be alone in the house with her when I did this. When I told Julie she had to leave, she didn't beg. She didn't cry. She exploded. She started throwing things. She screamed that I was ruining her life, that I was a jealous old hag. My son-in-law had to physically step between us because she lunged at me. We watched her throw her clothes into garbage bags. As she walked out the front door, she stopped, turned to me, and lowered her voice. "You're going to pay for this. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to burn this house down with you inside it." She left, but the terror didn't stop. For weeks, she called the house constantly. If I answered, it was just heavy breathing or her screaming obscenities. If I let it go to voicemail, she left messages describing how she was going to hurt us. She stalked me at work. She would call the bank from other offices, pretending to be a customer, then start screaming when I got on the line. She would park her car across the street from the branch and just watch me through the window for hours. My boss finally had enough. He contacted HR and we had another conference call. They formally fired her. Security had to escort her out of the building. I thought that would be the end of it, that losing her job would force her to move on, but it only gave her more free time. I started finding things around the exterior of my house. Cigarette butt under my kitchen window, the kind she smoked. One morning I found a dead bird on my welcome mat. It hadn't died naturally. Its neck was twisted. Then came the worst day of my life. We had a Doberman. He was a gorgeous, loyal dog that I loved more than anything. He was our protector. Julie knew that. She knew he was the only thing stopping her from just walking back into the house. I came home from work one Tuesday. Usually my dog would be at the door barking and wagging his tail. The house was silent. "Buddy," I called out. Nothing. I walked into the kitchen. The back door was unlocked. My heart dropped into my stomach. I ran into the backyard. I found him near the fence. He wasn't moving. There was foam around his mouth and a piece of raw meat lying nearby. She had poisoned him. I fell to my knees, screaming and crying, holding his cold body. I knew it was her. I knew it in my gut. We called the police, but without video evidence, they couldn't arrest her. They took a report, but that was it. After the dog died, the activity stopped. I think she felt she had gotten her revenge. Or maybe she realized killing the dog would bring too much heat. She vanished. It took me years to feel safe in my own home again. We got a security system, new locks and motion lights. My husband and I repaired our relationship, but we never fully forgot how easily she tore us apart. I'm 64 now. I have let my son move in temporarily when he needed help. But that is family. That is different. Since that time, I will never ever let another stranger, good friend, neighbor, or anyone who claims to be in need live with me. You never really know who people are. You see the mask they wear at work or in public, but once you let them into your home, once they are behind closed doors, the mask comes off, and sometimes what's underneath is pure evil. I feel very lucky that we got her out when we did. If we had waited another week, I don't think my husband, my granddaughter, or I would be here today to tell this story.